Hola, ¿cómo están? Empezamos nuestra conexión global de esta semana. El primer ministro israelí, Benjamín Netanyahu, enfrenta un grave escándalo de corrupción en su país y lo enfrentaba ya antes de las elecciones del pasado martes. Sin embargo, muchos todavía lo apoyan. Por eso fuimos allí para saber por qué no lo abandonan.
In the days before the election, supporters of Benjamin Netanyahu roll up to a strip mall in the south of Israel. Miri Regev is a right-wing Likud politician. She's Netanyahu's Minister of Culture, and tonight she's campaigning for his re-election.
מי שלא רוצה שמאל עם גוש חוסם של מפלגות ערביות חייב לבוא ולהצביע ב9 לאפריל מח"ל.
How is this election different from the past election?
הבחירות האלה שונות בזה שיש כאן המון פייק ניוז. לפיד גנץ, ממשלת שמאל שישבו יחד ממפלגות ערביות, שמה שהמפלגות הערביות עושות, בראשם טיבי, זה לעודד טרור, לעודד שהידים, ולא לגנות פיגועים כנגד חפים מפשע.
Her comments start to upset someone in the crowd. His name is Murad. He identifies as a Palestinian citizen of Israel. The past decade has been defined by the leadership of Benjamin Netanyahu. In a country facing constant threats, many credit him for keeping Israel safe and strong.
We will do what is necessary to defend our people and to defend our state.
But now he's caught up in a corruption scandal and will almost certainly be indicted on charges of bribery and fraud. The polls are close, so we came here to listen to his supporters and understand why people are sticking with him. We're on the Israel-Gaza border. Palestinians continue to protest against an Israeli blockade that has suffocated them. And the Israel Defense Forces are on high alert for violence and Hamas rockets. We visit nearby border communities in the south, where Netanyahu's hardline stance makes him popular. Though his supporters are very diverse, this working-class area is a rock-solid base for Likud.
Let's get the ball!
Did you play?
I play, but I...
Alon Davidi is the mayor of Sderot, a city less than a mile from the Gaza border.
I believe that our Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, he is the best man that we can get in this time. Because we see what he done with Iran. We see what he done with the economy of Israel. And we see the security in this area. Imagine that in Manhattan, every week someone will send rocket. What you ask from from Trump, what you ask from your president, you will say, destroy them. מה העניינים? נהנות? יופי. מה, אתם לא עוזרות לאמא ביום שישי?
Even children here know an alarm means they have 15 seconds to get to safety.
You can see we have a shelter, a lot of shelter here.
So that's a shelter,
This
right?
is a shelter, and this
there.
is a shelter, and this is a shelter, and there we have a shelter. 4 years ago, in Saturday evening, me and my family, we live very close to here. We start to hear the alarm system, red color. The rocket land, you see the car?
The car, the truck
car,
right there?
yes, yes, yes. The rocket land there.
There's a saying here, Rak Bibi, which means only Bibi. For many it means only Netanyahu can keep them safe. From the community of Netiv HaAsara, you can see the fence separating Israel from Gaza. We visit the Tassa family. Like everyone here, they had to build something called a safe room in their home.
So you see?
Oh, this is...
And as you see,
very small. Every time I have a bomb or an alarm, I need to run here. But it's not safely because we don't have enough time. We have 15 seconds. And if I don't listen, 5, it's not a real life, you know? And this is our life. Some of us want peace, and a little bit of us, like me, don't believe in peace. They want to kill us. They want to destroy us. They want to kill Israel.
You don't think peace is possible?
No.
It's possible.
Not for me.
Not now. It's possible, but not now. Now
No.
the Hamas is in Gaza, and you can't go and do with them peace.
Hamas is Hezbollah. Hezbollah is Iran. Iran is my enemy. That's it. For me, I don't see a partner to have now peace. And Netanyahu is the only one for me that see the same thing about them, Netanyahu. That's it. For me, no one can replace him.
What are some of the other issues for this election that are on your mind?
I don't have,
This is the most important.
of course.
Every Israeli election has been about security, and many Israelis have trusted Netanyahu to keep them safe, which is why his main rival now wants to emphasize that he can be just as tough. Benny Gantz is a 3-star general who rose to the highest ranks of the Israeli military.
לשים סוף לשגרת הטילים הזו. אנחנו נילחם, אי אפשר לתת לדבר הזה להמשיך.
And his campaign has highlighted the need for unity within the country.
לא יכול להיות שנתניהו מקצין ומפרק בינינו ולא מאחד בינינו.
But to win a parliamentary majority and become prime minister of Israel, Gantz's party is expected to form a coalition with parties well to his left. So it's not clear to some people here what his leadership would bring.
איך אני כבוחר יכול להצביע לך כאשר לא ברור לי על פי האנשים במפלגה שלך מה תעשו כאשר תצטרכו להגיע להכרעות בכל נושאים שבהם אי אפשר להיות מרכז וחייבים לנקוט בעמדה שמאלית או ימנית.
מבחינה ביטחונית מדינית אני טיפה ימינה. מבחינה חברתית אני טיפה שמאלה.
Shiri Sapir cares about security. He leans left and believes in a peace process with a 2-state solution. But in Netanyahu's Israel, some consider him a traitor.
I'm going to give my life in the next 3 years to the army. I'm going to be Kravi. Maybe I'm going to get in Gaza. Am I a traitor? How can you say that?
In many ways, this election is really a referendum on Netanyahu and the direction he's taken the country. In this political campaign ad, Israel's Minister of Justice mocked rising concerns about the erosion of democracy.
Fascism.
It went viral.
לי זה מריח כמו דמוקרטיה.
Minister Ayelet Shaked's New Right party is more right than Netanyahu's, but he will need her party to form a governing coalition. We came to her private campaign event to see how conservative voters were feeling about Netanyahu. And it quickly became clear. They're worried.
לכן אמרנו שאם נגיע לנקודה הזאת, נחליט באותה נקודה.
למה אתם לא מתנערים עם נתניהו? שיעמוד מישהו אחר בראש שלי.
Divisions are forming among his traditional political allies. So many Israelis who supported Netanyahu in the past must decide if they should continue to support him now. Israeli society is incredibly diverse, and Netanyahu's leadership has deepened divisions and pushed the country to the right. After 10 years of leadership, the question is, can Israelis imagine a future without him?
Joanna Hausman es una comediante, escritora y actriz venezolana-estadounidense quien ha ganado mucha popularidad a través de sus videos en YouTube. Ella trata de explicar cómo reflejan los medios la discusión sobre el problema venezolano, tanto del lado demócrata como del lado republicano, y cómo sus compatriotas quedan siempre atrapados en medio del fuego cruzado.
There is total chaos in Venezuela. Hunger, lack of medicine, and latest, nearly the whole country had a blackout. But most of the conversation in the States focuses on what Trump is doing about Venezuela, and rumors are spreading that the US is considering military intervention.
All options are open.
This movement on the American left against any U.S. involvement in Venezuela is gaining traction. We've got Noam Chomsky, Roger Waters, Oliver Stone, Boots Riley, Ilhan Omar, AOC, Jill Stein, and Bernie.
Why have you stopped short of calling Maduro of Venezuela a dictator?
Well,
and of course, we've got this lovely guy.
Donald Trump, hands up Venezuela.
It is not a good look when your slogan is co-opted by a tyrannical dictator. Now, Trump usually loves authoritarians, but this time it seems like it's the liberals who are siding with one. Now, I am not a pro-Trump military hawk. For reference, my spirit animal is Ruth Bader Ginsburg in workout clothes. But this movement is dangerously glorifying a brutal dictator and promoting inaction. And that is the worst combination for ordinary Venezuelans. First off, if you look closely at these protests, it's very unlikely you'll bump into, an actual Venezuelan.
where are you from? Where am I from? Yeah. Here. Where are you from? Philadelphia. Where are you from? No comment.
Trust me, if this was an actual Venezuelan protest, it might look more like this. Second, let me remind you what's going on back home. Inflation is at 2.69 million%. Bolívares are so worthless, people are literally making origami out of them. Mass malnutrition and shortages of medicine have caused life expectancy to fall 3.5 years, and at least 3 million people have fled their country, causing a Syria-level refugee crisis. I mean, things are so bad, kidnappers have stopped kidnapping because people can't pay ransom. Some pundits of the left claim Venezuela is an economic ruin because of US sanctions, but they are wrong. Venezuela's economy completely collapsed in 2016 after decades of corruption and incompetence of Chavez and Maduro's narco-kleptocratic governments. Until very recently, US sanctions were only travel bans and frozen bank accounts on specific government officials. Like, for example, Chavez's former bodyguard, who accepted over $1 billion in bribes, has 3 private jets, and owns more horses than a Revolutionary War battalion. One of them is named Tinkerbell. That has nothing to do with how corrupt this guy is, but I just found it fascinating. In January, the sanctions on the state oil company were designed to stop funding Maduro's regime and their flamboyant watches. While Venezuela's situation is a dumpster fire, hands-off Venezuela advocates seem to be living on another planet.
We just returned from 2 weeks in Venezuela, and we are happy to report that there is no humanitarian crisis in Venezuela.
I'm sorry, what?
Just a crisis of U.S. imperialism.
It is true that the U.S.'s history of meddling in Latin America should give people pause, but complete inaction out of fear of the U.S. repeating its interventionist mistake from the 80s is not the answer. Hands off can actually mean blood on your hands. So what does American support look like? Supporting Venezuela's efforts to restore democracy. The US and 50 other countries recently recognized opposition leader Juan Guaidó as the new interim president.
Is this a coup d'etat?
Trained by the CIA.
This is regime change number 68.
Juan Guaidó is not an American right-wing puppet leading an illegitimate coup, but a social democrat appointed by the National Assembly, the only remaining democratically elected institution left in Venezuela. Guaidó's job is to ensure free and fair elections because, newsflash, the last election was not free or fair. Dictators aren't really into that. The problem is Venezuela is being used to further polarize political agendas on both sides. Republicans are trying to drum up another Red Scare for their 2020 campaign.
What it's doing in Venezuela.
That worked out so great in Venezuela.
Look at Venezuela.
America will never be a socialist country.
While the left is using it to counter Trump, because it's what you do. What unfortunately gets lost in the crossfire is the actual Venezuelan people. People who want a chance to live with electricity, food, jobs, schools, medicine, and a vote that actually counts. If there's one value liberal America appreciates, It's human rights. So let's stop this morally relativist, hands-off approach that is just a euphemism for inaction. Let's provide humanitarian aid and support efforts to restore democracy and prioritize people's rights to life, health, and freedom.
Los campesinos que se dedican a la siembra del aguacate en Tochimilco, poblado ubicado a las faldas del Popocatépetl en México, viven en medio de la actividad del coloso y de las amenazas de Donald Trump de cerrar la frontera.
Los campesinos que cultivan aguacate en Tochimilco, al pie del volcán Popocatépetl, en México, están acostumbrados a la actividad del coloso. Ahora también lidian con las amenazas del presidente de Estados Unidos de cerrar la frontera si México no frena la inmigración y el tráfico de drogas hacia su vecino del norte. Cerrar la frontera significaría cerrar el mercado estadounidense, destino de 80% del aguacate de México, el mayor productor mundial con casi 2 millones de toneladas en 2018.
Pues nos perjudicaría porque pues nuestro producto allá es muy, pues como diré, muy preciado, ¿verdad? Por los americanos y lo consumen mucho.
En Tochimilco hay unas 200 granjas de aguacate de tamaño medio que venden a intermediarios que lo comercian en el mercado. Estados Unidos es el principal importador del fruto que fue domesticado al sur de México y cuyo nombre proviene del náhuatl aguacatl, que también significa testículo. El aguacate es parte de la dieta de los estadounidenses y es el ingrediente principal del guacamole, uno de los favoritos para el Super Bowl. Los cerca de 2.000 millones de dólares que representan las exportaciones de aguacate son emblemáticos en el comercio entre estos vecinos.
Y a ellos no le conviene también porque pues, el aguacate es muy bueno transportarlo para otros países. Y si él ya no quede, pues vamos a perder mucho.
Ante el temor de un desabasto por las amenazas de Trump, los precios se dispararon 34% en los últimos días. Aunque la mayoría de los aguacates se quedan en México, que consume el 78% de la producción, los campesinos de la zona ven con temor la posibilidad de un cierre fronterizo. Creen que con ello el mercado mexicano se saturaría y los precios se desplomarían. En la zona es habitual realizar ofrendas al volcán. Algunos quizá esperan que el ritual también dé resultados con Trump.
Artesanías de hoja de maíz. Terminamos nuestra conexión global de esta semana hablando de un tema llamativo y sorprendente. Las bacterias parecen estar rebelándose. Le están ganando la batalla porque son más sagaces a nuestros maravillosos medicamentos. En el siguiente video intentamos entender por qué se produce este fenómeno.
There once was a man named Albert Alexander. He was a policeman.
Hey.
In England.
Hello.
One day on patrol, he cut his cheek.
Ouch.
Which led to a terrible infection. See, this was back in 1941, before patients had antibiotics. These were the days when a little scratch could kill you.
Or you got an ear infection and you died. A cat bite and you died. Or you stepped on a stick and you died. All of a sudden, antibiotics come along and bang.
The antibiotic era had begun. Soon, a slow and painful death became a 7-day course of antibiotics and a $10 copay. And Albert was the first patient in the world to receive the antibiotic, penicillin. And it worked.
We just came up with a life-saving, life-extending drug. One of the greatest developments in human history. Except not.
That's Matt Richtel, a science reporter for the New York Times. For the past year, Matt's been talking to health experts to find out if we are reaching the end of the antibiotic era. Modern medicine depends on the antibiotic.
And having used it so much, we're now putting it at risk. Is our fate sealed?
First off, I don't think people respect bacteria enough.
This is Ellen Silbergeld, one of the leading scientists studying antibiotic resistance.
Bacteria rule the world. We are just a platform for bacteria. Within the human body, there are more bacterial cells than there are human cells. So we are, in fact, mostly bacteria.
Alexander Fleming,
the man who discovered penicillin,
in his Nobel speech said, hang on, be aware, when you start killing this stuff off, it's going to fight back.
Do we pay any attention to that? No.
The CDC got our attention today with a warning about what it calls nightmare bacteria.
These are bacteria that are resistant to most, if not all, antibiotics.
When we take antibiotics to kill infections, some bacteria survive. It used to be they'd replicate and eventually resistance would grow. But now they're way more efficient and share drug-resistant genes among themselves. So every time we take an antibiotic, we risk creating stronger, more resistant bacteria. And stronger, more resistant bacteria means less and less effective antibiotics. And this is a problem because we take lots of antibiotics.
Money gets made over the sale of antibiotics.
Big money. Globally, the antibiotics market is valued at $40 billion. And in the US, the CDC estimates that about 30% of all prescribed antibiotics are not needed at all. That's 47 million excess prescriptions. And in many places outside of the US, you don't even need a prescription.
You can walk into a pharmacy, a pharmacist will diagnose you and give you antibiotics. I tend to think of it as a story of Darwinian forces multiplied by the pace and scale of global capitalism. In an interconnected world, travel, import, export, we're moving the bugs with us.
I can go to a meeting in China or Vietnam or someplace.
This is Lance Price, the director of the Antibiotic Resistance Action Center.
I could become colonized by untreatable E. coli, and I might not have any symptoms. You can get colonized and you can become this sort of long-term host.
So you could be healthy and still spreading bad bacteria without even knowing it.
Drug-resistant bacteria have never been able to travel the world as fast as they do today.
And that's just part of the problem.
You should know that about 80% of antibiotic production in this country goes into agriculture. Why on earth did somebody think putting antibiotics in agriculture was a great idea?
We've said, hey, look, cram these animals together. Don't worry too much about hygiene or trying to keep them healthy. Just give them antibiotics. And then in a couple weeks, you're gonna have full-grown animals that you can chop up and eat, right? And you can make money off of that.
Nobody was making the connection between feeding animals antibiotics and the fact that the food would be carrying drug-resistant bacteria.
So Ellen did a study. She compared different kinds of store-bought chicken, and she found that poultry raised with antibiotics had 9 times as much drug-resistant bacteria on it.
Now let's talk about the vegetarians. I just want you to understand, you're not safe. You know all these outbreaks that take place among the lettuce and the things like that. Have you ever wondered how that happened? It's because animal manure is used in raising crops. Organic agriculture lauds the use of animal manure.
Unless you're just a complete, I'm a vegan and I only hang out with vegans and I eat sterilized vegetables, you know, it's very likely that you're picking up the same bacteria.
Resistant bacteria seep into the groundwater, fly off the back of livestock trucks, and hitch a ride home on the hands of farm workers, all of which makes trying to pinpoint exactly where resistant bacteria is originating extremely difficult. And even when it seems like there is a clear source, things still aren't so simple.
No one wants to be seen as a hub of an epidemic.
Say your grandmother makes you a rump roast, and then that rump roast makes you sick. Well, if you live in France or Ireland or pretty much anywhere in the EU, packaged meat has a tracking label. You can figure out exactly what farm that meat came from. But in the US, not even the top public health officials can do that.
Most countries have animal ID laws. We don't.
Pat Basu, former chief veterinarian for the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service, basically one of the top veterinarians in the country.
Let me start at the beginning. We had a case where we had resistant bacteria causing illness in people. There were sick people that CDC identified.
More than 50 people in 8 counties have gotten an unusual strain of salmonella linked to pork.
This is not your grandmother's pathogen anymore. This is a new bug.
Health officials traced the outbreak back to the slaughterhouse and identified 6 potential farms where the outbreak could have come from. But then the investigation shut down.
The individual farmers have to agree voluntarily to share the data with these investigators who go out. We couldn't go any further back. It was a dead end.
192 people sick, 30 hospitalizations, and 0 access for health officials to investigate the farms.
The secrecy is maintained because there are big economic forces behind it. Farms are scared of losing their ability to get antibiotics. Hospitals are scared of driving away patients.
Well, as a physician, I do get very upset. I get very upset as a patient that information is being withheld.
This is Kevin Kavanaugh. a doctor and a consumer advocate for patients.
Drug-resistant bacteria is a huge problem. If it occurs at a restaurant, if it occurs in a cruise ship, you know about this immediately.
A salmonella outbreak.
Within days or hours of an outbreak occurring.
This morning, Chipotle is keeping dozens of its restaurants in the Pacific Northwest closed.
But yet in a hospital, it can take you months or even over a year until this data appears on a governmental website or reported by the CDC.
In the U.S., hospitals are under no obligation to inform the public when a bacterial outbreak occurs.
Defend and deny. They are very concerned about the short-term economic benefits rather than looking at long-term problems.
There's always this response like, well, but there's still a drug, right? Like, this isn't the end.
Remember Albert Alexander?
Hello. Ouch.
The first patient to be given penicillin? Well, his story didn't end there. 5 days after he started recovering, the hospital ran out of the new drug, and Mr. Alexander died. Today, we don't have to worry about antibiotics running out. We have to worry about using them so much that they stop working altogether.
Why a Metro Health Department didn't shut down a local restaurant.
4 of them died. We really need to change the way we use antibiotics, because the way we use antibiotics is destroying them.
It's putting at risk the entire system of care that we depend on for lengthening our lives and improving the quality of our lives.
The British government commissioned a study which predicted a worst-case scenario where more people will die by 2050 of these infections than will die of cancer.
That's a generation from now.
It takes 10 years to identify, develop, test, and bring to market a new antibiotic, and it takes $1 billion.
This is a common issue for humanity.
Very similar to global warming.
You can't control it as a single company. You can't control this as a single government.
And because the bacteria are now working together so efficiently,
unless the world acts consistently together, doesn't make a difference.